Hey, CityCasters, we have a fun call-in episode of Your City Could Be Better coming up in a few weeks, all about the dilemmas you have living in your city. And we want to hear your questions, like, is your neighbor being rude? Is it okay to put your dog poop or other trash in a neighbor's trash can? Send in your city life conundrums by using the Google form in our show notes or by emailing us at yourcitycouldbebetter@citycast.fm. Now, on to the episode. This is Your City Could Be Better, because it could be. I'm David Plotz. If you love your city and still complain about it, you're in the right place. How do you incentivize people to improve their community and help their neighbors? Taylor Leahy has been trying something unusual in Santa Cruz, California. Inspired by a waste exchange program in Curitiba, Brazil, Leahy has launched a bike exchange program and a waste cleanup effort that are a little bit different than the usual urban philanthropy. Taylor Leahy, welcome to Your City Could Be Better.
Thank you for having me, David. It's good to see you.
I saw you when I was talking about where you could put your trash. Did you have views on whether you can put your dog poop or your waste in a neighbor's trash can?
I like the idea of respecting people's, trash, but I also like clean streets. I also like clean public spaces. And if it works, I'll turn a blind eye. And I prefer the cleanliness over, people holding dog poop for, miles before they get back to wherever to throw it away.
Okay. I don't think usually it's miles. It's usually somewhere short of miles.
You're right.
Okay.
I mean, it could be in a car, though. If you're getting into a car and then driving home.
Yes, I've done that. All right. Let us start in Brazil, not in Santa Cruz. You wrote a book about a program in Curitiba. What is it? How'd you learn about it? And what struck you about it?
In Curitiba, from the 1970s to today, there's a program that existed. And in this particular time in history, there was a lot of litter. And there weren't convenient ways for trash trucks from the city municipality to go fetch the litter, to collect it. And they said, if you're able to collect it and bring it to where we can receive it, we'll give you bus tokens. And sure enough, it worked really well. And people would start taking the bus, and there's a really popular bus system. Their BRT is studied all over the world. But something that wasn't really captured, or loosely captured at least, was that people would hang on to those bus tokens. They would earn more than they needed, and they started trading them one for one. They're pegged to the real, subsidized to 1 real per ride. And people would treat them like money, and first amongst each other, and then at stores. And so all of a sudden, there was a secondary currency that was backed by public transit and was earned into existence by taking care of communities and taking care of the natural environment. It was open to everyone to participate in, meaning even today, you and I could go travel to Brazil and choose to pick up a bunch of recyclables. Today, it's recyclables in exchange for local produce from farms. And we'd be allowed to participate. We don't need papers to show that we're residents or citizens, and be able to earn some of the rewards.
So what you're describing is something which it looks like it has two elements. One element is there's a kind of communal need, a public good that kind of needs to be created, cleaner streets, recycling that gets reused. And then a second element, which is there's a secondary currency, a kind of currency, a compensation for doing this public good that is outside the just people getting dollars. It's something else. Why produce and why not money? Like what would have happened had they said, if you bring recyclables, you will get the Brazilian currency, real? What is the Brazilian currency? A real. You'll get reals. Why is it valuable that it be produce?
Well, I think what's so special about the system and how it's designed, this greater system that is the Cambio Verde, which is the name of the program, the Green Exchange. And the idea is that you turn inward. You offer the resources, the services and the goods that you have within your community to sort things out. So at that point in time, it was bus tokens, but it's also evolved to school supplies and as well as local produce. These are all essential needs for living life, and especially in urban life, to get around the city. So it was what the city had to offer, usually in surplus. There are plenty of spots in a bus, and based on the local farms within the city, it was easier to buy the the surplus yield from these local farmers and distribute those. So it was more of what was at hand rather than, something beyond a city. So like a national currency.
Okay, let's take it to Santa Cruz, California. Very different from Curitiba, smaller, richer, American. You decided to adopt a version of this in Santa Cruz. So what problem did you seek to try to solve with a bike exchange for starters?
For starters, so at first, after finishing the book, my children's book, Cambio, I've just had this great, you could call it expression, this urge to figure out if I could implement this in Santa Cruz. So I started scanning the culture and what it really values and what we might have abundance of. And next to surfing, there's bikes, there's mountain bikes, there's electric bikes. There's efforts to get people to use a ride share that was new to new to Santa Cruz as of the 2020s, B-Cycle. And I just decided to work off what was already existing in the community and have it also tied to a basic need, which is transportation. So I was sitting on multiple bikes that I wasn't riding, and I just judged that everyone else did too. So what if we could route these bikes to people that could use them and not have them sit idly in a garage or in a basement? So I found B-Cycle, and I just asked them, would you be willing to offer some ride passes, which I noticed that they were giving away to UCSC students, University of California, Santa Cruz students, to get around town and to promote their service. And I said, what if you offered those as a reward in my idea to bring these bikes and move them around from donation, refurbishing, and giveaway? They said, yeah, absolutely. And eventually I assembled, you can imagine like the Avengers of community good in Santa Cruz, and created this first proof of concept, which is the bike exchange.
And what happened? How did it work? Who participated? What did they do? What did people get out of it? How is the community helped or not?
Yeah. So I broke everything down into these necessary roles. So we had a donation population that was the Santa Cruz Waldorf School, as well as the Community Bike Collective. And I needed mechanics to work on the bikes, care for these bikes and clean them up. And that was also from the Community Bike Collective. And we worked with the Housing Authority as one of the giveaway communities. And so then with those three, I was able to, that was the primitive foundation, like, the proto-social foundation of which, something like an exchange could grow from, something maybe ongoing and regular. And one day what happened was all the bikes were brought from the school. They like kind of be stored there until they're ready, to a site that was the Housing Authority. And we would register them. We would, take inventory, and then we'd reward them with a B-Cycle ride pass, and all the mechanics would just get to work. And then once we had a nice group of finished bikes, we drove them off in this trailer to the Housing Authority building, and or I guess apartment complex, and we would just roll them out, and people could take whatever they want. They were theirs to have. And so what we had was just a very productive a single event, rather than these being done incrementally. In the past, the Community Bike Collective would receive bike donations and they would store them in their office. And eventually they would have a mechanic, refurbishing party. And sometimes they would have people come and take those bikes, and sometimes they wouldn't. So what this did was just compile all this work and all this effort and resources that would normally sit idly, and just get them completed and usable and out.
The element that doesn't seem to be here is there doesn't seem to be. So the bikes are created, the bikes are refurbished, so people are getting the good of the bike, but there's not a currency, there's not a kind of thing of value that the people who are donating the bikes are really. I mean, they're getting a bike pass, but that's not quite. It's a little bit less rich, I would say, than a token or a fresh fruit, right?
I totally agree, and that's why it was more of a proof of concept for something bigger. But I have to say, for the mechanics, I worked out this thing where you would get, of course, if you're a mechanic, you would get lunch, but your token would be usable for a ride as well as a beer at the brewery. And I thought that was as a a currency nerd, I thought that was really cool. But you're right, it's not as rich or useful. It doesn't meet basic needs as well. Like if we're talking like a week's or a month ride pass, that would be something. But that has a value that I would have to, set for the mechanics offering.
And then you've sort of moved on. I mean, I don't know if you've completely are not doing the bike piece, but you've moved on to also to cleanups. And how do the cleanups work in a similar way?
So there are nonprofits that do great work already in Santa Cruz. And I think what's really important to highlight is the city of Santa Cruz, the culture of Santa Cruz County at large has a lot of support, from volunteering nonprofit efforts to even a downtown dollar, which is what I use for a reward. The downtown dollar is a secondary currency that works downtown at 90 different locations, 90 plus different locations for businesses you can spend for services and goods. And I saw these two problems of the like many growing cities in California or maybe even United States at large. People were emptying downtown. They were not choosing that to be a place of recreation and getting shopping done. And I was seeing this litter nearby to downtown Santa Cruz and in the river. And I just thought like these two issues can be opportunities, and making a more desirable place to spend time is linked to, bringing people downtown, especially if you tie it to the reward. So what I did was I set an exchange rate, which was $20 of value downtown to 2 hours of work, where you would not just collect litter, but you would also document it so that different nonprofits could use it to write legislation with. And you would get it verified by like a station, and we'd weigh it. And that way we would say, we could go back to these businesses and donors and say, you spent $20 of value of, your goods and services, and this is what you got. And so what ended up happening was it rained pretty heavily on the first event, which was April 11th. And we ended up getting 102 people to come out in the rain, which is an achievement of itself. This experience of receiving something in exchange for your time and labor, I think is something that we're really missing.
With the 100, have you done that again yet?
Someone that attended the first event, she reached out and said, I'm noticing, all this litter in my part of the creek that empties out into the San Lorenzo River in Santa Cruz. I'd like to host a cleanup. And I was like, I will, like a grant, I will give you some resources. I'll have, give you some supplies. If you are willing to document this trash and weigh it for me, they're good. And I think, go for it. And so we had 3 different events in the end. We had this big centralized event where we had to take care of liability and the permit to do it downtown. We had this decentralized one that was a part of this greater cleanup day. And then we had this totally like a grant version where someone raised their hand and said, I'll take care of this.
I can't believe you had to get a permit and insure something like that. That's ridiculous. I mean, that alone, it seems like the city needs to deal with that issue.
Yeah.
If you're you're cleaning up the city, why is that a permittable activity?
And their argument is like it could slow down traffic, having people, go from one centralized place to the extremities of the river. And they would have to include porta potties with some of these arguments.
Get the fuck out. That is wow. That's a really shocking thing to learn. That government of Santa Cruz, you have a random listener out here who's learning about this. I'm genuinely shocked that you're putting this obstacle in the way of something like this.
I hear you, and they are my community. And so future versions of this, I really want to include the city and say your contribution would be waiving the permit, waiving liability, or, taking care of it. And they could evaluate, just like I did for these previous ones, like this by item, by weight, this is worth it. And not to mention we're cleaning and raising the value of the downtown land.
I don't know how well you can characterize this, but with the 102 people who came to the rainy cleanup, would you say that those are people who are the usual kind of volunteers in the community, or was it a different set of people?
So even someone that is cleaning up the river regularly on, a day where you wake up and you get off the wrong side of the bed, your neck might be tight. You go, I'll skip this one out. But with a little incentive and hopefully the social aspect of seeing and being a part of something bigger, it's worth it. I know that there are so many people that clean the river for the first time. I personally have a good friend that was supporting me, but he came all the way from the nearby county to participate in the cleanup. And that really moves the needle when, you make this a more social event, you grow the reach and you create these incentives that span, that offer value and create different forms of connection, across geographies. Like that's something else.
Today's episode is sponsored by YWCA Greater Pittsburgh. They're currently accepting nominations for the 2026 Equity Awards, which honor community members who support their vision of a world where everyone has equitable access to professional and personal opportunities free from injustice. There are 5 award categories: Ally, Bridge Builder, Creative Arts and Innovation, Emerging Leader, and Heroine. Nominations are going to be accepted through Friday, July 24th. YWCA Greater Pittsburgh also encourages self-nominations and especially wants to recognize women of color. So if you or someone you know has been stepping up for your community, this is the perfect opportunity to honor that work. And honorees will be recognized at the Equity Awards Luncheon on Thursday, November 19th at the Westin Pittsburgh. Learn more about the awards categories and submit your nomination today at ywcapgh.org.
Have you seen any other communities or organizations or cities adopting a version of either what you've been doing or what Curitiba has been doing? Do you have hope that this spreads like the aspens of the West?
I've heard of others. I haven't researched them as strongly as I could have or should have. And most of them are quiet and small. And a lot of this is turning inward. So it's not something we hear about on a national level most of the time. So I know they exist, but I don't know if I have playmates in other locations.
Is your gut instinct that this kind of model works well if the local government is involved and can provide resources, or it really works well if it is a grassroots built up from the people who live here doing it for themselves and actually is independent of government?
Due to the way taxes are collected and the power of the local government, it's become clunky to get things done with the city. And that being said, people are always asked to donate. They're always giving their time. I don't want big hearts to just continue to bleed. I would love them to get some support and have that be on a higher level, whether if that's through a chamber of commerce or from like a city, from the local government. So I think it should be the local government. I'm biased because I've got a taste of it when I visited Curitiba. I'll say I like how boring it is when the city takes care of it compared to a flashy donor throwing in a bunch of money and puts their name on it. Agreeing to vote into that or to have it going and have everyone say, yeah, that's a good thing. We should keep doing that. That brings me, a certain quality of life.
I mean, I guess I think I hear you about boring. I also hear you about the value of boring, and I also hear you about the issues when it's dependent on some big donor. I guess there's part of me that believes that one of the great achievements of communal life is in fact, a great thing about American life in general is that we are able, because we have lots of non-governmental institutions, whether they're churches, rec leagues, volunteer organizations, professional associations. Like, we're a nation that's filled, as de Tocqueville noted this in 1830, we're a nation that's filled with these, with independent gatherings of people, collections of people, communities of people that are outside of, in fact, government. And I like the idea of, and I think people are willing to put more energy into something like that because they feel a sense of autonomy and control over it in a way they don't if it's like, oh, this is a city thing. The city's got it.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And I think in where we are in American culture, where Santa Cruz is, I think it's got to be through a grassroots movement that it comes to that level. It grows into that level. And I absolutely agree. I've thought about ways where we could, have big events that are connected to festivals, that are connected to ways to like really create new experiences that connected to all different parts of what goes on in the city. And I'm here for all of it. It's got to feel like it comes from the spirit of the residents and the people there.
All right, last question of the main segment here. What can our listeners in other cities, not Santa Cruz, take away from this conversation to make their own city better?
So, abstracting from the Cambio Verde, I just think they're just essentially community exchanges. And we know what it's like to do a bake sale, to do a food drive. I see a community exchange as being another tool that we could turn to solve our community's needs. And to get them out and provide a structure for them is the first step. And I'll say, like, coming from Curitiba, I had a deep longing for a village, the feeling of being in a village where I give something that serves the population. There's a way to do this. And I like to think that it's going to look different, but it's going to be doable in so many different neighborhoods, cities, and communities.
All right, Taylor, let's end with our word on the street segment. So we're going to talk about city dilemmas in an upcoming episode, as I mentioned at the top of the show. So here's an urban dilemma that you might face. We started this conversation talking about bikes. Is it okay if you live in an apartment building? Is it okay for people to store their bikes in vestibules or in common hallways?
I want it to be okay. That tension between landlords and residents, it's going to be uncomfortable. And I hope it shifts in a way that promotes more walking and biking.
I think even though I'm a mega cyclist, I think I disagree. I don't think you can, that's like you're taking other people's public space. Now, there are different circumstances. You can imagine an apartment building has some very big area that is not being used, or you live at you're like the last apartment at the end of the corridor, and no one is walking by the space where you're putting your bike. But I kind of don't think it's okay to park your bike in a common area like that.
I know what you mean. And I also believe like it would be a form of activism. It's a way to get in conversation with the landlord and be right. This is a real thing that we're dealing with. And I don't know. I just think that's how, putting it out there and working on it together is how we make that change.
I like that. I like it is that you're speaking to your landlord by doing this. This is a conversation. So be sure to send your own city conundrums to us for our call-in episode. Fill out the Google form that's in our show notes, or send me an email at yourcitycouldbebetter@citycast.fm. Taylor Leahy, thank you for coming on Your City Could Be Better.
Thank you, David. It's great.
That's all for today's episode of Your City Could Be Better. I'm your host, David Plotz, and our producers are Aria Bracci and Priyanka Tilve. Our music is by Carl Christensen. If you are enjoying the show, please tell your friends, rate the show, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to be back next week with another conversation about how your city could be better. See you later.